So if we could begin to get settled in, I know we've got about 100 people online ready to watch. So we'll take our seats, candidates included, and just start to get settled. Let's see, so Hans sat on the end. Maybe. Good evening. I'm Karen Madsen. I'm with one of the sponsoring organizations, Conservation Montgomery. We have done this for 2 previous election cycles. We've done the Green Forum. This year, we lucked out and we got a number of really great partners involved with us. You can see all the partners, all the sponsors up on the screen, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. Couple of quick announcements before we get started. Welcome to everyone. Thank you to the candidates in particular for coming. And I want to note that all candidates who filed were invited to the event. At one point, we thought we had a GOP candidate, but then not. This is a nonpartisan and informational event, and we are fully compliant with all IRS regulations for nonprofits. The views that will be expressed by candidates here are their own and not those of the sponsoring organizations. We're all here to learn, get a handle on where the candidates stand on these issues. We want to thank the in-person audience for getting vaccinations and for being willing to come in person. It's good to see your faces. And we want to thank our virtual audience for being there as well. It's all one big community. So I want to talk about our partners very quickly. A few folks from the organizations could not make it, but I'm going to go ahead and call out their names. We had from the Audubon Naturalist Society and Stormwater Partners Network, Eliza Cava was involved. Is there anybody here from ANS? Anybody? All right. So Eliza Cava was involved. She was not able to come this evening, but a very valuable member of our team. And from Conservation Montgomery, stand up when I call your name and remain standing. We had Alan Bowser. Alan, give it a wave over there. Alan's got the camera. All right. And it was Alan and myself on the planning team. From Friends of 10 Mile Creek, the wonderful Sylvia Tagnetti. And stay standing once I call your name. Montgomery Countryside Alliance, we had Caroline Taylor and Christina Bostic. Is Christina here? Yes? All right. All right. Remain standing. Okay. Caroline is watching online. From One Montgomery Green, we had Wendy Howard. Is anybody here from the One Montgomery Green board? Okay. I want to acknowledge the valuable contributions from OMG, we call it, and Wendy was fabulous. From Rock Creek Conservancy and Stormwater Partners Network, we had Jeannie Braha. Jeannie, would you stand up in the back, give it a wave? And from Sugarloaf Citizens Association, we had Jim Brown. Jim, stand up. Steve Finley and Lauren Greenberger. I want you to look at these people standing up in this room. This is the best planning committee I have ever worked with on any project, and I would work with every one of these people again in a heartbeat. Please give them a really wonderful round of applause. Greatest team ever. Really wonderful. All right, let's talk a little bit about Kathleen Matthews. And someone picked up my bio of Kathleen. Is that over there?
I can introduce myself.
That's okay. All right. Thank you. All righty. Kathleen Matthews is our moderator this evening. She's no stranger to many of us. She's lived in the county for 40 years. Many of us remember her from TV, from her TV journalism days. She was with the ABC affiliate in Washington for 25 years. From there, well, she covered local politics, very important local politics, education, and reported on issues related to climate change. She had a career at Marriott International as well, and while she was at Marriott, she was chairing the company's Green Global Council, which oversees the company's sustainability goals. And she's now a political activist, and we're glad to have a pro here. What really resonated on Kathleen's bio for me was her role in the Girl Scouts. She's on the Girl Scouts board, and as a lifetime member, I would say card carrying, but I left my card at home. I'm a lifetime member of the Girl Scouts, and as the saying goes, once a Girl Scout, always a Girl Scout. So with that, I want to welcome my fellow Girl Scout, Kathleen Matthews.
Thank you, Karen. I think it was Girl Scouts and camp that really created my love of the environment, and I think that's why I jumped at the opportunity to be here tonight. So it's great to be with so many of you in person, and I also want to thank our Zoom audience of 100 people that is joining us tonight. We're going to make sure that you're included in this conversation. I'm really happy to be here as a Montgomery County resident, raised my kids here, and I love this county, especially the environment that we have here. We've always been seen as an exemplary county, I think, for communities across the country, and I think that's why an election like this is so important and why we care so much about it. It's why all of you are here tonight. There are a lot of important issues in this county executive's race, and there have been a lot of forums like this on other issues, focusing on other issues. COVID has really been the thing that's dominated so many of our lives for the past 2 years, but it's equally important, I think, to dive down on the issues that these groups have been focusing on and want this forum tonight to focus on. And that's going to be very important as we go to the polls, whether it's in July or August coming up. We're going to begin tonight, and I'll just tell you some of the rules, with a 2-minute kind of open-ended question that'll be an opportunity for each of the candidates to introduce themselves. And then after that, we're going to drill down on more specific issues. Throughout the forum, we're going to be integrating questions that came in online prior to this forum, and also ones that you've been generating when you walked in tonight, or that you might generate on a index card that we can try to move in. The forum is intended to promote progress on the environment and climate issues. It's not a gripe forum. If we see it devolving into that, we want to make sure that we shift directions. So please keep in mind with your questions to keep that tone. We are going to also allow a closing comment of 90 seconds, and if there are rebuttals for any of the candidates, make some notes and you can work your rebuttals into your closing comments so that we can do that at the end. Again, we'll be integrating these kind of questions that have been coming in from all of you throughout the evening. So let me just have the candidates introduce themselves as we ask them this question. Tell us about your environmental leadership. For example, can you name maybe 3 of your environmental accomplishments, what you learned from them, what you think you might have been able to do better, and your environmental priorities if you're elected? And why don't we start with alphabetical order? Let's start with David Blair at the far end.
Good evening. Thank you, Kathleen. So I'm David Blair. I'm a lifelong Montgomery resident, and no doubt I was blessed to grow up here. And so much of that has to do with our fostering the environment. And so I grew up in Darnestown and just loved those wide open spaces. And so some of the things that I did in a leadership role from a business perspective to help the environment. One, it was imperative that we be located near a metro so that our employees could get to our office easily. Secondly, you know what we did? We would have a program where twice a year employees could come in late or they could leave early if they would try to use mass transit, because we wanted to get them to take that risk and use transit. Another thing that we did that was innovative is we would pay for half of your monthly car payment if you bought a hybrid car, right? So that's how we were promoting folks so they could be more conscious friendly. More recently, we do things like if you go to our campaign office, we compost, right? We actually compost at home. We've been composting for years. No single-use plastics in our office or our home. Those are the types of things we do. But let me end. I say I have a minute left. About me, and I'll end with where I started. So I was clearly blessed to grow up in Montgomery County, and that was because so many people made sacrifices before me. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Scott Fossler. Scott passed away recently. He was a county council member. He was a longtime board member for the Countryside Alliance. He was a staunch advocate for the environment, and it was his public service that made Montgomery County the place it is today. And so now it's my turn, right, to try to follow in those footsteps and make sure that Montgomery County is the same great place for future generations. Again, thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you. By the way, we have a timekeeper here, so we are really going to try to keep this moving. And so as you see them wrap up, it's because they're getting that time cue. Let's move next to Mark Elridge.
One, two, three. Oh, good. So, I know tonight's about environmental issues, and so I'm going to focus in my introduction on that and a little bit about me. I think you guys know I'm a former at-large council member. I was at the Cohen Park City Council members, and I was an elementary school teacher. My environmental involvement in this county goes back decades of involvement. I worked with many of you in this room to fight the ICC and to fight the sprawl. We all remember the anti-sprawl movements that were meant to keep development out of the ag reserve and out of the northern parts of the county. I was on the original group that worked to oppose the incinerator, and not because people thought we should just dump everything in a landfill, because people believed then, as we believe now, that there are alternate ways of moving waste. And now that we think we've got proposals in front of us from a series of companies that want to replace our solid waste system, I'm looking forward to doing that and shutting down the incinerator. And I was opposed to M83, and so I've worked with a lot of you on that. 20 years ago, I served on Doug Dumpkin's Transportation Advisory Group. He created a Citizens Advisory Group on transportation in Montgomery County. Me and Neil Fitzpatrick and the other environmentalists on that group recommended putting the Purple Line in front of the ICC. We knew they would run out of money, which they did, to build the ICC, and they should have focused on the Purple Line first. They did not do that. I pushed to recommend the Purple Line, and I brought it in front of the council, and the council didn't support that either. Different council, different time. So my support for Transit First goes back a long way. When I was in the county council, I protected the C&O viewshed. I prevented a certain very wealthy person from being able to build down in the viewshed, and that protected the C&O canal. We put in an aggressive tree protection program. We didn't get everything we wanted, but we were able to increase the tree canopy. I literally designed the bus rapid transit network, which the nexus was we were trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and we realized that transportation being one of the key factors, we had to get people out of buses, out of cars and into buses, and everything wasn't going to be rail. And I continued to protect and work to protect the ag reserve, including leading the fight on 10 Mile Creek, which sadly we're continuing to fight because Park and Planning doesn't seem to care about the last best stream in Montgomery County. I helped lead the fight to ban cosmetic use of pesticides in the county, and this budget I've put forward has massive amounts of money for infrastructure improvements that are climate sensitive, and staff in the council, staff in the county to support all of the initiatives that we need support for. So thank you very much. I am out of time.
Thank you. Next is Tom Hucker.
Thanks, Kathleen. Does this work?
Slide it up.
Thank you. Now, better? Not my first time. 2 minutes, Sylvia? Thank you. All right, so I wish I had more than 2 minutes, but it's nice to see so many old friends in the audience. Thanks for Conservation Montgomery and to all the partners for putting this together. This will be tough. I've been in the environmental movement since I was 18 years old. I started working with the PIRGs to fight a nuclear reactor back then, and worked in the environmental movement all through college, and moved here to pass the Clean Air, to work on a campaign to pass the Clean Air Act. I worked on the Clean Water Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act, FIFRA, and RCRA, and many other new federal laws. Once I got into community organizing, I also, I should say, started, helped to start all the first canvases for the Sierra Club all over the East Coast, and I've been proud. I'm very lucky to work for the Natural Resources Defense Council for the last 10 years. I served in the Maryland General Assembly on the Environment Committee for 4 years, and the Energy Committee for 4 years, and where I got, I think, 100% rating from the League of Conservation Voters. While I was in the General Assembly, I spent 4 years passing the offshore wind legislation that is now the biggest solution to climate at the state level, getting rid of arsenic, the biggest source of arsenic, getting rid of the biggest sources of asbestos, and now on the council have worked with Mark and the last council to get rid of dangerous pesticides, to get lead out of our drinking water in our schools, to pass community solar zoning text amendment, and just passed the most significant climate bill we've ever passed in county history, the Green Buildings Now legislation. I am eager to do even more in partnership with you if I can be your next county executive. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So Hans, I'm going to skip over you because we're going to stay in alphabetical order, and I'm going to ask Peter James 3 accomplishments on the environmental front, what you could have done better, and your environmental priorities if you get elected.
Is there a trick to turning this thing up? Hello?
Sliding the button up. It works.
Got it. Yes, my name is Peter James. I moved to Montgomery County when I was 4 years old. At around 20, I headed out to Silicon Valley for 20 years to learn my high-tech trade. Out there, I did a lot of work for like one of the largest tomato industrial growers. I learned industrial farming from a technology side. And when I came back to Maryland with my kids in '93, I started looking at better ways of particularly farming, and particularly neighborhood farming. In 2007, I started First Fruits Farms, which has had many, many dozens of student interns come out and develop different renewable energy systems and robotic systems to make farming a better place. Out on my table, there's some different documents on different systems we can use to fix our problems. When I look at the Ag Reserve, other people see a pristine environment. I see an environmental disaster. I think we can't be providing citizen-owned land to industrial farming. One of the big crises, I think, also our focus in the county on greenhouse gas emissions has some flaws in it. One, if we're ever going to fix greenhouse climate change problems, we need to put that back into the earth, and there's technology to do that. You can learn more out there. My main goal is to provide at least 200,000 free EVs and replace BART, which is a photo of pretty much nobody on it during rush hour, with personal rapid transit systems. And as the sole authority to approve road projects, these are much cheaper, about a quarter cost of a BRT. The one in West Virginia has been running for 45 years without any accidents or deaths. Thank you.
Thank you. And Hans Riemer.
Good evening, everyone. How are you doing? I'm Hans Riemer, and I'm one of your 4 at-large council members. And I developed my passion for the environment as a kid, growing up in California and hiking the Sierras. My parents took me camping a lot. I did a lot of learning about John Muir and, the history of conservation. And it has stuck with me. And I am passionate about climate change. I'm a parent. I've got 2 kids, and I know that the climate climate that we're living in today is not as good as the climate that I was born into, and my kids' future is not as promising as it should be. And I'm going to do something about that, and I've been doing something about that as a council member. I'm very proud of my work at the council on climate issues. Just to cite a few examples, I've been the council's leading champion on smart growth. And smart growth is a critical part of the Climate Action Plan, particularly Thrive Montgomery 2050, which the council must pass in order to fulfill the land use part of the Climate Action Plan, as well as the smart growth master plans that we've been adopting for years. I am also was the lead champion, worked closely with Councilmember Hucker, but I was the lead champion on the proposal to allow property owners in the agricultural reserve to install solar, provided they continued to farm the land beneath that solar, which was just named by the IPCC as one of the essential strategies to combat climate change today. I'm working on provisions right now for an all-electric building code. For forest conservation, I'm working with many of your groups to convene that process and put a strong proposal before the county council. And I introduced an amendment to Councilmember Hucker's great bill on the Green Bank to make sure that that funding only went to electrification and not for any natural gas equipment. So I've been working hard on how I think we have to think differently about climate change and take bolder, stronger action than we've been taking, and I ask for your support. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to go reverse alphabetical order now, and so that means you get to start again, Hans. We know that transportation accounts for 42% of Montgomery County's gas emissions. That's only second to buildings in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. Tell us what your position is on new highway projects like the Mid-County Highway Extended M83. Do you support a ban? And if you do, have you supported one up until now?
Well, I proposed and the council agreed that we would remove M83 from transportation calculations for future master planning because I don't support M83. I don't think it's necessary, and I think BRT on 355 provides a sufficient alternative. I think it's important to provide an alternative. I also worked with many council members. I think Councilmember Hucker and Berliner and I were the three amigos who removed Montrose East from the capital budget and replaced it with bike and ped projects. I have supported a few projects like Observation Drive because that is part of the BRT alignment into Clarksburg. So generally, there really aren't a lot of highways in Montgomery County. If you're talking about county highways, which is what you referred to in your question, and I'm sure we'll get into the other highways soon, but there aren't a lot of county highways in the, on plans to be removed, and I have been pretty strong. I guess I don't know what more you can ask for as far as making sure we're not proceeding with some of the other damaging projects. So I advocate for bike and transit and pedestrian projects wherever I can. I've been the lead putting more and more funding towards those crucial priorities, and I believe in them passionately. Thank you.
Mr. James, what is your position on proposed highway projects? New ones.
Yes. Well, I'm proposing a third choice, and that's something called personal rapid transit. There's some pictures out on my table out there, but essentially in the same space you can move 15 times as many people as highways. And this was actually done back in Morgantown in 1975. They've reached Vision Zero 45 years ago. They haven't had a single serious injury or death. I live 50 yards from M83 right as it hits Seneca Creek. I want to put a neighborhood greenhouse there. I want to put neighborhood food all over the county, starting with maybe the lower income areas. And with we have a project we're going to be giving away free electric vehicles. The best way to get gas car, and these will take up a quarter of the space of a standard car, is if we want to really get gas cars off the road, the best way and quickest way to do it is give away free electric vehicles. So there's more detail on how that can be done, at least explaining to a rational person. And I want to let you look at some of the other information on my website at pjames.us. Thank you.
Mr. Hucker, do you support a ban, no new highways in Montgomery County?
I have a long history of opposition to unnecessary highways. I have never supported M83 when I was a state delegate, and I'm glad that the District 39 delegation up there doesn't support it either, or as a county council member, and now I chair our environment and transportation. But I've spent a lot of my time in that role fighting the Beltway expansion, speaking of unnecessary new highways. And in this room, ×2, when this wall was gone, I sponsored and organized and worked with many of you to organize 2 rallies against the Beltway expansion, where we turned out over 1,000 people and generated thousands of signatures to Governor Hogan. While I was on stage working with, there were 40 environmental groups that worked on that, including many of you. Governor Hogan was live tweeting, criticizing me and the whole crowd, who was trying to do the right thing and fight to defend our climate and our neighborhoods. And I worked with Department of Transportation and Park and Planning to propose an alternative, went to the Board of Public Works, and we could collectively, we put enough pressure on the governor and the Board of Public Works that they removed the Beltway expansion, the northern part, from their plan. That's exactly the type of coalition building, consensus building, and innovative work that I could do as county executive ×10. So thank you very much for all of you who fought with us on that battle, and we need to keep the Beltway from expanding by holding them accountable to their promises. Thank you.
Mr. Elrich.
So I have a long record of actually being involved in the fights to stop expansion. So I was involved with folks in the community. I've walked the M83 path. I walked the ICC path. And I was actually actively involved in all that work to make sure those projects didn't get done. We lost on the ICC. And like many other things, we spent a lot of money on a promise that would bring all this development and glory to Montgomery County. It brought neither development nor glory. It's just a road cutting through the woods and damaging the streams. I was very involved in the fight on I-270 and the Beltway, and not only supported making sure that we didn't go on the Beltway side, but very supportive of making sure we did the reversibles, which is something that former council member Phil Andrews and I came up with when O'Malley had proposed widening the Beltway during his term, and we said, why don't we do reversibles? There's not enough traffic here to justify the widening of the road. And so I've been involved in this, in the details of it. On the bus rapid transit, that was an effort of mine that came out of climate awareness, because we knew that if we didn't get people out of cars into buses, we were going to struggle to meet any kind of climate goals. COG was failing to meet its climate goals. My staff and I literally laid out the routes for the bus rapid transit one day, and we actually got them passed by Park and Planning and built into the master plan. So we've been deeply engaged. I've been deeply engaged in this, and I really believe that we need to focus on transit solutions, not road solutions.
And finally, Mr. Blair.
So public transit has to be the first option. And this really epitomizes why I'm running for county executive. We actually have a public transit option, right? We have the ride-on bus. It's been around here for decades. But this is shocking. Ridership on ride-ons was down 25% pre-pandemic for the 10 years up to the pandemic. 25% reduction in ridership. Expenses have been going like this. It makes no sense. 4 years ago, I was pleading, make ride-on bus free, make it permanent. I was talking about how we needed to look at our bus routes and where our bus stops are. City after city in this country has looked at their local bus system, redone the routes because people change. Like in Houston, they saw ridership jump up almost 10% during the week and over 20% on the weekends because they realized that people need to get from where they live to where their jobs are, and that changes. And so the first thing we need to do is invest in the infrastructure we have here. The second thing we need to do is we need jobs here. You cannot build roads wide enough if you don't start creating jobs here. Before the pandemic, it was estimated that 200,000 people were leaving Montgomery County every morning for jobs. Virginia, D.C., right? How wide do you need to make the highway if you don't start creating jobs here? So that's why I put so much effort into our economic development plan, because we need to have jobs here. It's better quality of life, and it's better on our environment. And that's what I'll do as county executive. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to address a few issues around environmental justice, and we actually got some questions both from our Zoom audience and also from the audience here today regarding environmental justice. Let's start with transit and some of the issues around that. Many of the low to moderate income families in Montgomery County can't afford a car, or they can barely afford a car. And in some areas where housing is more affordable, particularly up county, there's really no accessible public transportation. In certain down county neighborhoods that are closer to public transportation, there's no affordable housing. So tell us what you're going to be doing to try to ensure that low-income families can afford to live closer to transit. And I'm going to start with you, Mr. Riemer. We're going to ping-pong around with different people starting.
Well, thank you. Boy, I've been working to make that possible since I joined the county council, particularly by re-envisioning our communities that are around public transportation, to modernize the zoning so that the property owner can build more housing there than what had previously been allowed. And that's smart growth. That's what I believe in. That's what I've been fighting for. And I have been battling, of course, principally with the county executive for many years over smart growth. And I believe he's wrong about the value of smart growth in our climate agenda. We have to see housing growth, including affordable housing growth, along the purple line, up and down the red line, in places like downtown Silver Spring, in places like Rockville and Littonsville and Shady Grove. And so new housing promotes affordable housing, because you get set aside affordable housing in the new housing, and when you add to the supply, you reduce displacement. So Silver Spring, for example, has a lot more affordable housing than it ever has had, because we've been getting new development. So, you know, I was not involved in fighting the development in downtown Silver Spring 30 years ago. I embrace it. And I think that's how we're going to get solutions for our future, is by looking to the future. So that's how I would do it.
Mr. Eldridge, I'll let you respond to that in your answer. How do we enable low-income families to be able to live closer to public transit?
Well, a couple of things. And first of all, the zoning we're doing isn't providing enough housing for low-income families. In fact, it's pretty much a joke. If you look at Bethesda, and we looked at this in my office, all the housing built in Bethesda between 2012 and now in the apartments, we get our 15% MPDUs. By the way, that means if you build 1,000 market units, you get 150 affordable units. That's not going to change anything. Almost all the units are 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom. So much for the families coming there. We don't make requirements for multi-bedroom, 3-bedroom or more units in the apartment buildings that are built, so the developers don't build them. We don't require them to provide housing either below MPDU prices or between MPDU prices and market prices. So we could build all this housing in Bethesda that we're doing, but it's happening exactly the way I told people would happen when I was on the council. All the housing being built above MPDU level is market expensive housing. It is not affordable. Millennials who talk about the lack of opportunities to live here, it's no wonder, because the jump between an MPDU 1-bedroom and a typical new 1-bedroom in the new buildings is over $1,000. That's not like you just missed. You're just above 75% of area median income. This means even if you're at 80 or 90% of area median income, you're not getting housing there. So if the council wants to change things, you need to require housing at the lower group, below 50% of AMI. You need to provide a tranche of housing between 50 and 75% of AMI. And you need to provide some housing above 75% of AMI for young people and young professionals who cannot find housing in the luxury housing that the products of the previous council have created. And I stand by what I did on the previous council. I voted against that stuff because I knew what was going to happen. I knew we were going to build an exclusive community there, and that's what's happening, and it's wrong.
Mr. Hucker.
I'm so glad you asked about racial equity and transportation, Kathleen. The first thing you do is you keep transit, especially our buses, free. And that's one thing, Mark and I agree on a lot of environmental issues. That's one where we're completely opposed. He has proposed year after year, the last 2 years, raising bus fares. When I, as the chair of the Transportation Committee, with the support of Councilmember Glass, Councilmember Riemer, and the rest of the council, have insisted on keeping our buses free. We need people to ride our buses. We need to rebuild our ridership, and it's a fundamental equity issue. We've now done the study that 35% of our riders, our average riders, make $35,000 a year, and they're overwhelmingly of color. Second, you don't fix housing through zoning. Ike Leggett built, we had the same zoning under Ike Leggett. He built a record amount of housing, and that all screeched to a halt 4 years ago. We need a leader that's committed to build affordable housing. In D.C., they're spending $1 billion on affordable housing since 2015, and they're building a lot of affordable housing. If I'm county executive, I'm going to make that kind of commitment. We need a leader who's committed to affordable housing, committed to racial equity, and puts their money where their rhetoric is. Thank you.
Mr. Blair.
This is very much an equity issue, and it's a fundamental right that if you work in this county, you should be able to afford to live in this county, and that's not the case for so many. And so whether it's our teachers, our nurses, our first responders, if I'm in a group of them about this size, I'll be lucky if half of them can actually afford to live in this county. And so earlier I said that 200,000 people were leaving the county every morning for jobs. Ironically, 200,000 people move into the county every day for jobs because they can't afford to live here. So we've got to invest in not just affordable housing, attainable housing, workforce housing. We have a housing crisis. By the county's estimates, we need 30,000 new housing units built by 2030. Last year, I think it was less than 1,500. You don't need a calculator to figure out that we're not going to get there at that pace. But what's great is we've actually invested in metro stops, right? We have metro stops like Shady Grove, White Flint, Forest Glen. These are where there's transit, right? So they can get to their jobs. There also can be walkable, bikeable communities. And that's where we need to be building housing. Because if we don't, what we see happening, we're losing our talent. So our teachers, right? How often are they going to be able to drive from Frederick or Howard County? Right? Eventually they're going to say, you know what? I could get a job here. So we're losing our talent. We need to start building housing here around our transit.
And Mr. James.
This is one of my big issues. One of the reasons I'm running, because I asked for a purchase order of 100,000 electric vehicles that I was going to get to the county for free, and I was told no thank you. If we approach by giving more transit right now, 4% of the population ride the ride-on bus. If we increase that a little bit, it's not going to have the impact. And we're asking for marginalized transportation, marginalized people to sit in the back of the bus, essentially, because it takes several hours to get what should take 20 minutes. If you look into these personal rapid transit systems, they're faster than cars because they go point to point. They would take up 1% of the land area up 355 versus the BRT. And BRTs kill. They were taken off the roads of London because they were 4 times more likely to seriously harm or kill someone. So I have a lot of, our company came in as a finalist to redo all of the intelligent transportation systems. There's simple things we can do, like when you pull up to a red light, why in the world is it still red when there's no cross traffic? So those sensors are very simple to implement. Pedestrians, as far as are more likely to be subject to injury than passengers, and there's a social equity divide between who's riding transit and who's walking next to it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We've heard a lot about Thrive 2050, the master plan. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Elrich. What do you think about the added density that is proposed in that plan, and also the extent to which it actually addresses environmental issues sufficiently?
Where to start? Look, first of all, there's not going to be an equity in this plan. Park and Planning did a study of Silver Spring. They said, if we build according to Thrive, what are the units going to cost? And they came back and they were told by their staff, the units will be more expensive than the units that are there today. This is not going to produce anything that addresses equity. And if you talk to real estate agents, they tell you the same thing. If I buy $1 million house and I tear it down and I build 3 units, I'm building, and particularly UIA is going to build $3 million townhouses. That's what you're going to get. So if you're interested in bringing affordability, this is not the tool to do it. In fact, this is the council's great escape. The power they have is to zone so that in Bethesda and all the other places, as Mr. Blair would say, are where you have opportunities to build. But if you don't change the zoning requirements, if all you get is 15% of the market units, you're not going to serve the lower income people and you're not going to serve the middle income people. And so you'd have to do 2 things. You have to go back into the master plans. You have to require mixes of units. You have to provide more availability across a spread of incomes. If you don't do that, you're going to wind up with what's happening in Bethesda today. So Thrive does not solve that problem at all. And environmentally, you take an area that's basically green, and now you're going to pave it over and increase the impervious surface. Whereas if that development where it was targeted to go in Bethesda and in Silver Spring and in Wheaton, if it goes there, you couldn't harm a blade of grass in Wheaton. You'd be hard put to find one. So densifying Wheaton has virtually no environmental consequences. Densifying the suburban area has major environmental consequences. And when the council was told about what the cost of that would be, they just said, we don't believe what the cost of this project, of what Thrive would be. You can't make policy if you don't believe the numbers that you're given, unless you've actually done research to indicate they're wrong, which was not done.
Mr. Hucker.
I'm lost on that, but look, Thrive is Thrive's their general plan. I'm not sure everybody knows that. We have to have a relevant legal. We have a legal requirement to have a relevant general plan. Our general plan was written in 1993. 2 things it doesn't mention: climate, because nobody's worried about climate in 1993. I think climate's pretty important. I bet you do too. And racial equity. I think that's pretty important, especially where planning's concerned. But that's not in our current general plan. So we need to update it. Thrive is completely a work in progress. There's already been hundreds of meetings on it. There will be many more meetings. And so everybody that wants to have input into Thrive has an open invitation to have more input into Thrive, including the county executive. But the fact is, Thrive doubles down on a lot of things that are great for the environment. 1, smart growth. You're either for smart growth or you're for sprawl. You can't have it both ways. And Thrive doubles down on smart growth. It also doubles down on parks. It doubles down on 15-minute communities. So because all of us would like to be able to walk or bike safely to a restaurant, to a dry cleaner, to a coffee shop, and to our job. And that's what Thrive envisions. It doesn't change any zoning. It's an aspirational a plan that I think if people read it, they'd be very excited about it, and anything they want to change, there's an open invitation to do that. So I know it's been politicized. I know people want to score political points and votes by demonizing it, but our expert, nonpartisan staff at the planning staff, I don't think it's fair to them, and I don't think it's fair to the hundreds and probably thousands of residents of Montgomery County that put their thoughts into that document. So that's where I am. It's much better for the environment than the current master plan. Thank you.
Mr. James.
Yes, I went out and polled everyone I knew and every person I see on the street. Do you know what Thrive 2050 are? Not a single, yes, not a single person in this county, maybe out of, besides some engaged people that are in this room. And what I'm proposing is first of all, is to make the board of Park and Planning an elected position or roll it back into the government, because there's no response. I had a meeting on the Q4 board plan to present personal rapid transit, Casey Anderson closed the meeting, which was probably a violation of the Open Meetings Act. I'm proposing something called a digital twin of Montgomery County, and this way we can take these crazy ideas that I and other people have and actually simulate them and see what the carrying cost to water, sewer, school enrollment, and all those sort of things in an online simulating tool, and allow people to vote on what they want in their communities, or at least give them the ability to see what's going to happen to it based on the general plan. I think the general plan is we have an oligarchy of a funnel for developers on the planning board, and I had an experience. I proposed a earthen-homed village, where a mobile home park, and actually provide those homes to the people that had mobile homes. And I was told, no, you can't do that. And 2 years later, Elm Street Development kicked them all to the curb with a $2,000 payment. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Riemer.
Well, I'm not sure that I agree that we should be looking at earthen homes, but I'll give you credit. You got more ideas than the county executive. What we've heard from the county executive is a whole bunch of reasons why we shouldn't build more housing, why the housing that's getting built doesn't work. Everyone in this room lives in a house that they got at the market rate, I bet. And, okay, maybe there's one or two exceptions. And if you own a home, you're probably hoping to sell at the market rate. And if you're not, if you are, you should reevaluate whether you think it's unfair to have a market rate housing. But I would just say, Thrive is the climate, it's the land use part of the climate plan. And there is an entire environmental movement dedicated to getting Thrive accomplished. And the county executive has given what I think are really unfortunate comments, criticizing it, raising unfounded concerns about it, attributing things that aren't true to it, and we need to get Thrive achieved. And I would say to the county executive, how about, if you're so concerned about affordable housing, how about the Chevy Chase Library? Where's your recommendation for affordable housing on the site of the Chevy Chase Library? Why is it that we can't have more affordable housing at the Chevy Chase Library? That's public property that you control. So I don't think this stuff all adds up. We have to grow and change. And new housing is part of the solution. New housing around public transportation is climate friendly, and Thrive is a key piece of the vision.
And finally, Mr. Blair.
So Thrive is 87 pages long, and there's numerous good suggestions in there that are environmentally friendly. Like, we've all got to really like the 15-minute community, the idea that you can walk or bike to a job or to a restaurant or to a community center makes a lot of sense. And Thrive also does a nice job of describing the challenge that we face in the shortage of housing that we have. So I'm a naturally curious guy, and so White Flint, which isn't far from our campaign offices, has been empty for a decade, right? And it's actually zoned properly for mixed income, mixed use. We've actually given tax credits so that developers will develop it, but yet they're not building the housing that we need, even though it's next to White Flint. And so when you meet with the owners, the learners, what they'll tell you is, David, people want to live near where they work, and the jobs are in Virginia, and that's where we're building. And so we've got to start creating jobs here. And so, you know, one of the things that I'll share with you, I talked about how I've put a lot of effort in this comprehensive economic development plan, but we actually have less businesses in Montgomery County now than we did 15 years ago. Tens of thousands have been created around the region. And just think how entrepreneurial Montgomery County is. 1/3 of our residents were born outside of the United States. That's entrepreneurial, right? They learned a new culture, a new system, maybe a new language, and yet we're lagging the region. We should be leading the region in new business growth. And that's what I'll do, and that'll help spur development to get places like Montgomery, like White Flint built. Thank you.
We have a number of questions, both from the Zoom audience and also here in the room around our tree canopy and forests. And so I'm going to kind of shoot a couple of those at you right now. What are your ideas for updating the laws that concern the protection of forests and mature tree canopy? And how can we improve access for all county residents so that they can actually enjoy parks and you know, the beautiful environmental nature of Montgomery County, where you do have good tree canopy? Let's start with you, Tom Hucker.
Thanks. I think Sylvia is accelerating my cards here. I just feel like I'm just kidding. Tree canopy is and forest conservation is a huge issue, and it's very central to our climate strategy. We made this very ambitious commitment to reduce our carbon by 80% in 10 years back in 2017. What do you know, it was before an election year, and then to eliminate it by 2035. And we've made next to no progress in the last 4 years. We're supposed to be dropping it by 8% a year, right? You can do the math, and we're not there. We can't get there without forest conservation and tree canopy. We need to strengthen our laws to do that. We need to strengthen the replanting ratios to require more trees, and we need to require more trees in the right places and protect our forests, not just random trees in random places. We need to tighten requirements around the easements and make sure that they're used consistently and not capriciously and not inconsistently. And we end the allegations of favoritism and often corruption in some of our county agencies. And we need to shift to a focus on forest ecosystem, not just putting trees wherever a staff person allows. I'm very committed. I'm working closely now with, I see Mike Riley here from the Parks Department, very committed to working with DEP, the Planning Department, Parks Department on new legislation. They're doing analysis right now that will result in a bill that I'll bring to the Transportation and Environment Committee as the chair. I'll get it through the committee. I'll get it through the council in partnership with you and the whole Montgomery County Forest Group Coalition that we've been working with. Thank you so much.
Mr. Blair.
So the benefits of a healthy tree canopy are far-reaching. So the county estimates that each tree planted reduces personal energy costs by $20. If you have 100 mature trees, keeps 140,000 gallons of water out of our drains, right? That's captured before it gets into our stormwater. So we need a healthy tree canopy. And so I've committed to planting 10,000 trees a year. Last year, the county planted 1,800. We can do so much better. Baltimore County did this. They planted 11,000 trees. And you do it with an equity lens, right? So what communities can benefit most from tree canopy? So where has there been deterioration? Where can they benefit from the climate cooling and the air quality? That's where we'll be planting the trees. I would also pursue a no-net tree loss program. Like I would update our forest conservation laws. And lastly, trees are no good if you don't maintain them. And so by the county's own 2020 infrastructure maintenance report, we have a $187 million backlog on tree pruning. If you call up the county today, you could take up to 5 years to get a dead tree stump removed from the sidewalks, the roadways, or off the sidewalks and roadways for a new tree to be planted. So those are the three things that I would commit to restore our tree canopy.
Mr. Riemer.
Thank you. Well, I am personally very passionate about trees, having grown up in a house that had a backyard with a lot of trees. I spent a lot of time in them and falling out of them, and I feel, it's a precious resource. And as county council member, I have worked to move the ball forward on tree canopy issues in very significant ways. I am the author of the amendment that created the program called Tree Montgomery. So today, if you would like to get a true canopy tree in your yard, paid for by the county, you can go to Tree Montgomery and request it, and the county will pay for it, and the county will even maintain it in a limited way. So I believe very passionately in it, and I think we could do ever more. I think we plant more trees than was was suggested earlier, if you look at all branches of the county government through DOT and parks, we plant significantly, I think we probably plant significantly more trees than anyone has mentioned today, but I also think we could certainly do more. I will also say they are a critical stormwater resource, and it would be helpful if we could figure out how to count trees in that process. And lastly, I'm the one who asked the planning department to convene the stakeholder process that is producing the forest canopy recommendation that we will receive. And I look forward to working with you on that, and we're going to pass the best bill we can.
Mr. James.
Yes, this is one of the reasons why I'm running. I propose the solutions to the parks, the tree farm. We make robots, robotic mowers are all electric, and we proposed automating the process of growing trees and planting them. And usually in the first 2 or 3 years, you sort of have to babysit them to make sure they're healthy. And it's all well and good to wait for Santa Claus to come around and provide the money to do major, reforesting, but that's just not in the cards. So you have to lower the cost. I'm willing to give, free license to all this technology to the county and its members, but my goal is to reforest that 90,000 acre ag reserve. We can produce in greenhouses. I set up the hydroponics program for University of DC with maybe 5% of the land and greenhouses that grow people food instead of chicken food. We can reforest. We don't have to reforest it all in lumber trees. We can reforest it with nuts and orchards and all those different things that become locally grown food and materials for building. This is a map of downtown Silver Spring. We have over 40% of the land area in parking, surface parking, and roadways. With a PRT system, we could get most 80% of that back for walkable neighborhoods and parks. There's more parking, surface parking, 4 times as much surface parking than parks in this area.
Thank you. Mr. Elrich, finally, what are your ideas for updating the laws concerning the protection of forests and tree canopy?
First thing you could do is repeal the bill that allows you to take land in the ag reserve and claim that the existing trees are a substitute for the trees you're about to cut down. That's kind of an oxymoron, and so it's great to hear people talking about this, except they just did this. And so we need to, if we're actually going to be serious about it, you have to require people to plant trees, not go to some farmer and say, I'll give you money if you promise not to cut this thing down, which you weren't going to cut down anyway. So that's one thing I would do. Our plans need to put more green into the urban areas. This fixation with covering every square inch of the downtowns and not putting in proper parks is a real problem. If you look around Silver Spring, some of the public spaces that could have been greened are all concrete. They didn't have to be all concrete. They're all concrete. The stuff that was promised in Bethesda through multiple master plans never got built because the developers weren't required to give it. You've got to require and get the land you need for green space, and then you need to plant it, and then you need to take care of it. And frankly, it's easy to say. I could say all the things I do. However, I actually have to live, and so does the council, in the world of real money. And we require a healthier economy. We are in a better year this year, which is why we're putting a lot of money into the environment. But the last 3 years, we've been on basically same services budgets. And I thought at one point the council and I agreed on that limitation, but it's political now, so now it's not true. But we're in the same services world, and you need revenues, and that's why we do need to have some economic development so we can actually do that.
And I'm going to let you turn around, Mr. Elrich, and answer this next question, which really deals with water. And you've all been talking a little bit about development, and there are oftentimes unintended consequences of that development. As the county grows, and with some of the proposed upzoning in residential neighborhoods, we're seeing more impervious surfaces, the loss of tree canopy, combined with stronger storms that we are seeing with climate change. So this has resulted in degrading water waterways, including some that are upstream from our drinking water intake, more flooding in people's basements and homes, and is contributing to increasing urban heat. How are you going to address these compounding issues as we try to look for development?
Well, I think, and I've said this before, I would focus the development around the centers that were designed to be the development centers, and I would not spread the development into the neighborhoods. It's bad enough that they want to do it, but the chair of the Planning Commission, by the way, who wrote Thrive by himself and didn't follow the staff's draft or the advice of the citizens who commented, you know, if you take a 1 mile walk shed and claim that's your walk shed around the transit area, actually the walk shed is a half mile. That is WMATA's walk shed. It is every smart growth group's walk shed, but this county pretends that the walk shed's a mile. Why? So they can push density to a place where no one's going to walk from while they're claiming that they're actually going to walk from there. If I'm going to densify something, I would densify it as narrowly as possible. I'd focus development where it's already been planned for. I would not let it trickle out of those areas, and if I do that, I would avoid the enormous cost it's going to take to go back into regular neighborhoods and refit their sewer systems. This is not something like extending the inlet. This means digging up all those streets and changing the piping to hold the volume of water, which is what's causing the flooding that we see now, causing the complaints from neighborhoods that have never seen street flooding before. The streams and the storms are overwhelming our systems and putting more load on them when this would be much easier to accommodate in the urban centers is what we ought to be doing. And I've never been opposed to building things in urban centers. I oppose the height and the density on particular projects that makes the stuff unaffordable. There are ways to do this. Other people get this right. We're just not getting it right.
Thank you. Mr. James.
Well, one of the things I'm looking at with the digital twin is also doing a digital twin of the subterranean area. We have different structures where there's slate, where things will run a long period of time. Prince George's County is really ahead of the Montgomery County and stormwater management. There's, instead of giving away compost tubes, we can give away a kit for stormwater injectors for homeowners that they can easily put them into the ground, because addressing the pervious surfaces, we propose a PRT with a solar panel where we can redirect the stormwater. So there's a lot of putting a rooftop, which is down at University of DC's main campus, on the rooftop, can actually sequester that water. There's a requirement at DC now that there be enough water holding tank to take the maximum stormwater, but that could actually be utilized to actually grow food in areas to support a walkable neighborhood. Also, by cutting down the pervious area dedicated to, which is about 4.8% of the county, in roads and parking structures. We need someone who understands technology to understand how we can apply smart cities, autonomous vehicle technology, and the other, to get rid of the need to give so much of our land over to the automobile. Thank you.
Mr. Riemer.
Great. 3 points I'd like to make. First, we have to build in our urbanized areas. If you oppose building more housing in the urbanized areas, then what you do is you obligate people to find somewhere else to live, and usually that's going to be farther away from their jobs, so they're going to be driving in from a longer distance. They will have less affordability, and that crushes your workforce. So whether it's your dental hygienists or your mechanics or your teachers or your police officers, no one can live in your community anymore. That's what's been happening to Montgomery County over time, and I think we're hearing an advocacy for that problem rather than trying to solve that problem. Secondly, second and third, there are two major problems with that we have to solve. The first is that existing buildings are very energy inefficient. So we want to actually tear them down and build new buildings in their stead, because new buildings have very tight energy codes and must be built to very high standards. They're very efficient. They use less energy. Secondly, new buildings have stormwater treatment. New buildings, old buildings just let the water rush off the parking lot into the drain, and it goes rushing down to the streams, and it scours the banks, and it destroys the stream, and it sweeps down all the pollution and the mud into the bay. We need new development in order to treat and hold the stormwater and slow its dissipation into the watershed. So when you're anti-development, you are opposing the very changes that improve environmental mitigation. We've got to change our mindset here, folks.
Mr. Blair.
So we're already experiencing the severe impacts from climate change, right? And we see it in flooding. The warmer temperatures are causing more intense and wetter rains. It was, last year we saw bad flooding in Rockville, tragically killed a resident. The year before that, you probably remember we had severe flooding in Silver Spring and Kensington, Chevy Chase, and before that, I remember the previous year it was MacArthur Boulevard, where we had a month's worth of rain, like in one afternoon, completely washed away our roadway. So we've got to use every tool in our toolbox to address this. I'd suggest it starts with let's fix what we have. Today, Montgomery County has a $47 million backlog of storm drain maintenance. We need to fix that. And what floors me is when you look at Montgomery County, there's 3,100 counties in the United States. We're the 17th most richest. So we're like this incredibly rich county, and we can't take care of our storm drains. Just think how important that is. So one, we got to do that. Second, we've got to invest in every technology that we can to keep the rainwater before it hits our storm drains. So we talked about the tree canopy. A healthy tree canopy captures the first half-inch of rain before it goes into our storm drains. Are there green infrastructure, more permeable purposes or surfaces? Those are the types of things that I would be investing in to address the flooding that we have. Thank you.
And finally, Mr. Hucker.
I'd work with Diane Cameron on this. Sorry. There's a lot of stuff we need. We need a countywide hydrologic analysis of individual properties and the countywide stormwater conveyance system. We need to strengthen our forest conservation and tree canopy law. As has been said, we need much more money going into parks, especially urban parks. We need to invest much more in impervious surfaces and expand the Rainscapes program, which I've used for my driveway. I hope you all do. There's a backlog, and the money is always used up. We need a lot more money in that program. And finally, we need a lot more state and federal money, and to really work in partnership with our very talented state and federal legislators. We don't have any lobby firms working in Annapolis right now, which is insane. And we don't have any professional lobbyists working on the Hill, which is nuts, at a time when they're giving away more money for this sort of infrastructure improvement of any time in our lifetime. And it's going to Prince George's County and Baltimore and D.C., but not in Montgomery County, because we don't bother to hire, and we don't have a leader who puts an emphasis on that and puts all that burden on the taxpayers. It's funny listening to Mr. Elrich, because he's made a career of being against all this stuff, but he's been his little history of actually bringing people together to solve thorny issues and address them. And at these forums, I'm often left wondering who the county executive is, because he makes everything sound so terrible, but he has the power to solve each of these problems next week if he had the skills and the willingness to do so. Thank you.
We're going to shift to renewable energy right now, and we do have a number of questions from the audience here and also at home on the best way to deploy renewable energy installations in the county. Somebody asked, would you put solar panels on all of the public buildings as a step towards moving heating of buildings from gas to electric? Please, Mr. Hucker, why don't you turn around on this one and tell us what your strategy is for increasing use and production of renewable energy.
I'm sorry, Kathleen. I'm still thinking about the last one. Can you repeat the beginning?
Yes. This is the quick pivot. This is about renewable energy. What would you do as a strategy to shift the county towards more sources of renewable energy? Would you make a requirement that it's deployed on all public buildings, parking garages, to shift us from gas to electric?
Sorry. my phone. I would do a few things. I just passed, with the unanimous support of the council, including Mr. Riemer, the most significant climate bill in the county's history. And that puts, this year, it puts $18 million into the Green Bank. Thank you, County Executive, for following the law on this. And the Green Bank is going to now use that to leverage much more private investment, and it will free up $80 to $100 million in energy efficiency investments in our buildings and renewables as well. So that means a lot more solar panels, a lot more geothermal in all of our building stock, which are the biggest sources of carbon in the county. We need much more adoption of solar across the county. We are putting solar panels, for example, on one of our landfills. We're only using 6% of the available space on that landfill. That's nuts. We need much more. We need a county executive who's actually committed to solar adoption all across the county. We declared a climate emergency in election year again, but we treat it like a niggling little climate concern. We don't really do anything about it, and that takes leadership from the county executive. And then finally, we don't control the whole energy mix ourselves. We have to work very closely with our state legislators to change that. I served 4 years on that committee. I'd be in Annapolis as your county executive all the time in my old committee to get the dirty energy out of the RPS and to make sure that we're building the solar market, building the wind market. I spent 4 years of my life getting offshore wind off the coast of Maryland, and now it's finally getting built. That's the kind of commitment we need from the county executive.
Mr. Elrich, what's your preferred strategy for increasing production of renewable energy and boosting energy efficiency?
It's sort of an all-above approach, but I will say I've been in Annapolis working on these things. We've talked with the wind companies that are going to be producing wind energy about us potentially buying it. I worked with Lord Charkoudian to get the bill passed in Annapolis that would make Montgomery County the model, the pilot for community choice energy. I spend a lot of time talking to people in Annapolis about doing things, which is why we've been somewhat successful in getting a record amount of money actually out of Annapolis this year. When you look at our budget, you look what's about to happen from Annapolis, you're going to see it. My view is basically we need to solarize as much of our surface as we can. I'm a big believer in doing it at the home level because it's closer to where the energy is used. You lose too much in transmission lines, so the more we can get homeowners to adopt solar, the better off we're going to be. It is very difficult to do solar on tall buildings. You very, very rarely get enough to do anything than operate your basic lighting systems because there's not enough surface area on the top in order to actually provide energy for the entire building. But we're actually talking to companies that are looking at can they solarize the vertical sides of buildings with transparent glass, which is now available, that would actually allow us to use another surface area that we've not had access to before. Same thing with greenhouses in the Ag Reserve. The ability to use clear solar panels in the Ag Reserve enable us to both collect electricity but also do farming underneath the solar panels. There are a lot of things we can do. I'm optimistic about being able to do it. Our Government Services Department is working with the school system. The school system has agreed to let our people and the contractor we have look at all of the school sites in Montgomery County for solar, as well as examining every site the county owns in the county for solar. So we're going to build as much as we can, and I wish somebody would ask me about how to pay for this, because it's not in our budget to be able to pay for these kinds of things. So we're actually finding an alternative way to pay for things.
Mr. Riemer.
Thank you. Well, I believe in solar everywhere. We have to have solar everywhere. We need it on our personal home rooftops if we have a home. We need it on our county office buildings, on our schools, on our parking lots, and we need it on the ground. And you may have seen that this week the IPCC, which is the UN's climate research arm, released a seminal report. And the emphasis of the report is on how we have the technology in hand to reduce climate emissions in half by 2030. I might have said 2050, actually. And the emphasis is on solar. And what they actually said, I want to read this. It says, the deployment of solar and wind energy has been assessed to become increasingly feasible over time. The feasibility of some options can increase when combined or integrated, such as using land for both agriculture and centralized solar production. So the UN's climate arm is telling us to use land for both agriculture and solar, my friends. 2 years ago, I proposed that. And as you know, that plan was eviscerated. We have not gotten a single proposal as a result. But as county executive, I am never going to give up until we get it done. We are going to make it happen. We are going to allow property owners in land that is zoned ag to install solar, and we are going to power 50,000, maybe 100,000 homes here in Montgomery County over time with locally generated solar. That's what I'm going to do, and it's the most important thing we can do to solve climate is to generate clean, renewable energy. It is number 1, number 2, and number 3 on our list to fight climate change.
Mr. Blair.
So under County Executive Leggett, he built approximately 7.5 megawatts of solar. Since then, there's been little progress. Meanwhile, in Howard County last year, they're building 24 megawatts. And they're going to get that done in 2 years, and that's going to power half of their county governments. And if we're serious about meeting our goals, our ambitious goals of zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2035, we've got to be investing in solar. And so I would take advantage of Maryland's environmental services, where they have a free program where they can determine the suitability for solar for buildings and property. We can take advantage of that, and then I'd move aggressively to deploy solar arrays on county-owned buildings. And I think we're all probably in favor of solar, but here's the difference, right? So as an executive, you're setting a bold idea. Let's triple our solar power, right? Like a bold idea. And then you're recruiting and you're retaining the best talented people, and then you remove obstacles to get it done, and you get out of the way. And that's what I did in my career, right? It's how we were able to build one of Fortune's most admired healthcare companies here in Rockville. It wasn't me. It was attracting talent, and we have so much talent right here in Montgomery County to solve these problems, to get this done. And that's the kind of executive leadership that I'll bring to this role. Thank you.
And finally, Mr. James.
Yes, so I actually testified for Mr. Riemer's solar panel bill and got kicked out of the Countryside Alliance for it. But being into agriculture, I proposed that there be a requirement for each panel to grow crops underneath it, and as opposed to the fanciful idea that you can somehow let some light through a transparent panel is just, the photons need to get absorbed somewhere. So you're really splitting the efficiency. But there's a lot of medicinal crops that are much better for us than the commodity crops we're currently growing, and they'll produce 10 times or more the cash flow. So if we look at that approach to be able to both preserve the production, and a lot of these crops are nitrogen fixing, and since we automate it, we can make it economically viable, and we'll give away that automation for free. So we do need to expand solar, but I think we need to also focus a lot more on geothermal and passive designs of buildings. We have a gem in this county. His name's John Spears, and he spoke yesterday at the Energy Summit. So there's things we can do that maybe make set a bar of requirement that new buildings meet these efficiency goals. Thank you.
We're going to shift to waste now. We're trying to catch all the topics, and we had a question from the room regarding the incinerator. For the past 25 years, Montgomery County's been sending about 200,000 tons of toxic ash from our trash incinerator to be dumped in a site near Richmond, Virginia, a site that is actually near a majority black community. The Zero Waste Montgomery Coalition has found that the cleanest, safest, and most cost-effective way of managing trash that cannot be recycled is to stop burning it and actually ship it via truck to one of several well-managed landfills out of state. So the question here is, what strategy would you support? Should the county close the Dickerson incinerator? And I'm going to start with Mr. Blair.
Yes. Yes. For sure, we want to close the incinerator. But first, we need to reduce the amount of waste that we're sending there. Right? I have a saying, you can't throw away your old pair of shoes till you get a new one. So we need a solution for the waste that's going out there. And I would start with composting. So we're sending 160,000 tons of food waste there. And to put that in perspective, that's about 43%. So that'd be a great way to start. In fact, Arlington County is the first county in the region last year. They announced countywide weekly curbside composting pickup. So we can do that too. I would actually start with our schools. Huge waste of food comes out of the schools. And I love how our young students, our young children, how they teach the parents, right? And they come home, you know, my sons do it to us, my wife and I all the time, and they tell us about what they're learning. And so I think, and that's the future of our county, our children. So I'd start with the schools. And so the pathway to close the incinerator is to stop sending waste there, and let's start with curbside composting. Thank you.
Mr. Elrich.
So when I first got elected, actually before I got inaugurated, I was greeted with the surprise that the county executive had extended the life of the incinerator, thereby making it impossible to shut the incinerator the way we had planned. However, this is what we're doing. We put out an RFP for every possible use of waste that comes into our solid waste transfer facility. So we're taking bids on all the components of the waste stream, including composting and digestion. But we also have had a bid from somebody who's proposing to take the entire facility over and massively recycle things and reduce the amount of waste that would go to a landfill. I believe very strongly it's not enough to just ship the stuff to a landfill. I think we have a moral obligation to actually recycle as much of these goods as possible, not simply put them on a truck and send them away. The evaluation is being done now. We hopefully will soon pick a plan in order to decide what to do with this. And when we do this, we'll have a path to greater recycling, less stuff that will go to a landfill. The number that David gives on composting is about right, and so that'll take a huge load out of the landfill and out of what we burn, and we will shut the incinerator down. And we've talked with the advocates of this. We're hoping we can have a one-year timeline in order to affect this. We need to have a plan, but once we have the plan, we'll tell the incinerator operator to give us the estimate on what we're going to have to pay, because we are going to have to pay to shut the incinerator down. But whatever it is, I believe it's going to be worth it in the long run. The incinerator's gotten more expensive over time, and it's certainly not the thing Montgomery County should be doing. So I'm optimistic that we'll actually get to shut it down.
Mr. Hucker.
Thank you, Kathleen. I mean, my gosh, it's just one more area where we've had 4 years of talk and no progress, just like most of our climate initiatives, like stormwater, so many other environmental emergencies. The incinerator is our single biggest point source of carbon pollution, and yet it was left out or taken out of the climate action plan. It's not referred to. I absolutely support closing the incinerator. We should have closed it 4 years ago. On January 30th, 2018, Mr. Elrich tweeted, "I'm preparing legislation to create a plan to transition us away from the incinerator." It's now 2022, and it's still cranking out 200,000 tons of toxic ash annually from the incinerator that we send to a majority black community outside of Richmond, Virginia. That's what's immoral. It's also immoral to do that much damage to our climate and to our air pollution in Montgomery County, and to all the people with respiratory disorders and other health issues that are harmed by that incinerator every single day. It should have been closed 4 years ago, and when I'm county executive, I'll close it right away, and it won't be a promise. It'll get done.
Mr. Riemer.
Well, this is a really tricky one, I have to say. You know, I think Mark has made some important comments here about going through a process and you know, seeking alternatives. I share Tom's perspective on making bold pronouncements and then not following through on them. And I think the process for identifying options should have you know, been initiated some time ago. And so I'm sure there are ways that we could do better than we're doing now. And I think we could be open to a lot of them. And so I'm very eager to see what comes from the RFP response. We do need to initiate composting, and in order to do that, we need to get a site in Montgomery County. If I have one real gripe along the path to shutting down the incinerator, I don't think the executive branch has succeeded at all on initiating a scale compost facility so that we can do curbside composting. You got to have somewhere to take it. And that's what's holding us back. It's just, we've got the trucks. We can pick up all the food waste in buckets. We don't have anywhere to take it.
Yes, we do.
And, we have a pilot facility to take it, but we don't have a scale facility for the whole county. And we need that. Well, maybe you'll shed some light on that. But, no such facility has been recommended in your budget. No such plan has been presented to the county council. So we need to move on that urgently in order to make it possible one day to shut down the facility, the incinerator, and we haven't made any progress.
Thank you. Mr. James.
Yes, well, see there, that's where I'm different from these guys. I actually have a plan I believe that we need to transition from, and I'm kind of the out-of-the-box thinker, so I don't look at traditional ways of doing things. I look at all ways of doing things. We need to shut down as soon as we can, and maybe start with sending it to a landfill somewhere. But I propose to the county using very low-cost recycling robots. We make a $500, it's called the Delta Arm robot that we use for sorting. One of the things I'm proposing is to put a makerspace into every neighborhood. So rather than we have to wean ourselves off of this Amazon, we've got to get more and more stuff. So if you need a toy for your kid, or you need a part for your bike, or a appliance, we can make them in our neighborhoods out of basically a corn polymer, and they can be melted back down, and it's a very sustainable footprint rather than our current. And the idea, I think our kids, when we tell them, oh, we used to have these diesel trucks, I asked the guy in charge of the solid waste program in the county, I said, Cornell has a questionnaire, and you fill it out, and it'll give you the footprint of your entire composting operation. And I also presented information from UC Davis where they actually computed how much composting, recommendations for composting by the county, grass clippings are all bad science, and I think I can fix that.
So I'm going to turn it around on you, Mr. James. So this last question, we're going to go a little bit over. We wanted to get you out of here by 8:30, but we started a bit late. So we haven't yet addressed the agricultural reserve. We have a couple questions about that. So we'll do one more round of questions on that, and then we'll have our closing statements. So Mr. James, given food insecurity, what do you see as the future and the purpose of the agricultural reserve? Could it play a stronger role in addressing local food insecurity and also carbon sequestration?
Yes, I've been talking to these commodity crop farmers for 20 years now, trying to get them to change their spots. They're not growing people food out there. They're growing food for basically to feed the chickens on the Eastern Shore. We have I believe we can turn it around by actually growing food in hydroponic greenhouses. We eliminate nutrient runoff completely, 100%. My buddy Paul Mock, who kind of mentored me on hydroponics, he sells down here at the farmers market his produce, but he's producing on 2 acres an equivalent about half of all the 400 plus table food farmers in the county. So it's very economical. He's producing over $1 million an acre. It's very profitable, and by, like I said, reforesting the ag reserve, I wouldn't mind even upzoning it under certain requirements, that it be treed, that it had adequate support for water, sewer, schools, and of course transportation system like personal rapid transit that actually remove cars from the road and reduce that traffic. But until those underpinnings of infrastructure, but just eliminating all that water use from industrial farming, there's plenty water left over, which Poolsville has a big issue with both water and perking out there. And I think I have technological solutions for that. Thank you.
Mr. Riemer, the future and the purpose of the Ag Reserve.
Definitely there are opportunities to transition farming more towards food that you and I eat, in its raw state, like fruits and vegetables. And it's true, there's not much of that. Most of it is commodity farming, which is soy and corn, and it goes into meat production essentially, and it's some industrial products. Soy goes into asphalt. It's a business, that's what it is. And I think we could help transition. Carbon sequestration is debatable, but one way in which I think it could be very viable is beneath solar arrays. Because when you have solar arrays, you could actually commit to no longer disturbing the soil beneath in order to use it as pasture land. And that would actually be effective carbon sequestration. So, in fact, if you like carbon sequestration, you should like our solar proposal even more, because it's a way to do even more with the land. And that's really what the IPCC is talking about. They say we have the technology now with solar to transition to a low-emission economy, and we should do it. And I've been advocating for that. I've been advocating for that very strenuously. And, the resistance to solar it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. Read the IPCC report and then ask whether Montgomery County is doing what we should do. And I'm sure when you read the newspaper in the morning and you see the IPCC report, you say, it's outrageous that all those other governments and the national government isn't doing what they should. We're not doing what we should do in Montgomery County.
Thank you.
Solar and farming is called out specifically in that report.
Mr. Hucker?
Thank you, Kathleen. Yes, the Agricultural Reserve is an incredibly important asset to Montgomery County, and the rationale behind it should keep up with today's values. And we declared a climate emergency. We should act like it again and not just treat it like a climate concern. So that means we should really focus on the crops that are grown there. Some crops like sod and like other commodity farms, commodity crops, can be net emitters of carbon. We should focus on carbon sequestration. 1 minute already? Shoot. We also should have more incentives for row crops, including trees, shrubs, vegetable crops. We should focus on pollinators and doing everything we can to restore their health. We should make more strides to improve our healthy soils and work with our food security task forces to get more local agriculture. And I worked with Jamie Raskin years ago to get locally grown food into our schools. That program needs to be dramatically expanded. And finally, the Agri Reserve isn't the only place where we have agriculture. I'm the author of the urban farming bill, where we saved Charlie Coyner's farm just a few blocks from here from development. Thanks, Joseph. That's a great example of the sort of urban farms. It was opposed by the administration, but we could have more urban farms. Previous one. We could have more urban farms like that all over the county that could be growing local fruits and vegetables. And what it does there, now it's the heart of an environmental trust that teaches local urban kids about agriculture, so they know where their food comes from and they know it doesn't come just in a plastic bag in a store. Thank you.
And Mr. Elrich.
So I'll take it by your comments that you'll support the money in the budget that goes to expand the Coyner Farm to other locations in the county. That would be great.
You bet.
Look, the Ag Reserve. It's nice to say they ought to be growing something else, but they own land and they've got to have markets. And I've had conversations actually with the farmers, and I've actually had conversations with grocery store owners, including Costco. And the problem for everybody is linking the two things together. Costco, for example, because all these guys aren't going to, by the way, just do roadside stands. Costco wants a regular supply of whatever crop it was and know that in April, May, and June, if they want to see spring onions, that somebody's going to produce the spring onions we they want. Farmers will not grow and turn everything into table crops unless they know there's a market for it. There are guys who've grown table crops, and you go up there some years and you just see fields of things like eggplant. Now, there may be other reasons for eggplant, but that are just sitting there and rotting away. So you need to link the farmer to the consumer, not just the individual consumer, but the corporate consumers, the grocery stores, whether they're big stores or not, and to the schools, which have been really resistant to doing anything that doesn't come neatly packaged and cut into perfect little cubes. You need to make those connections, and that's something that we're going to continue to push up there, but there's no way you can just go to somebody and say you have to stop growing sod. We don't have those kind of dictatorial powers. So you have to work with people to make this transition. And I believe that money is going to be the motivator for the transition, and helping create markets so they can do this is the way to approach this. Just saying that you guys are terrible, and by the way, feeding animals actually is feeding us. So it's not like animal feed is not food. It actually goes to what we eat. It has a value. But there, I think, are higher values, and we need to be able to do that. And the last thing I'll say is, what I like about the greenhouses is they'll let us grow food here pretty much year-round, whereas our crops are very limited to the time of the year. And so anything that extends the growing season would be positive.
And Mr. Blair.
So we're incredibly blessed that 40 years ago, our leaders set aside 93,000 acres for an ag reserve. It's a phenomenal asset, and there's no doubt that we can be doing a better job supporting our farmers. And so I think the county executive can literally connect the dots between what we need to do to support those farmers. And then I think about the importance of buying local. And if you look at our economic development plan, we talk about we've got to buy local. Our schools, they buy a ton of food. They're not buying it from the ag reserve. And the county executive is right, because we don't have a processing center that can cut the carrots up into nice little boxes or cubes and put them in a package. But we could do that, right? So that's where the county government can step in and play an important role between what's out there in the ag reserve and buying local. Now, we're not going to convert the ag reserve into some carnival with, paintball parks. We're not doing that. We're just going to support our farmers so that we can have an economic engine, right? Because we've got to get this economy going. And the other thing that's interesting about our ag reserve, and we saw this during the pandemic, food insecurity and food pipelines. So we did numbers of roundtables with restaurant owners during the pandemic. You might remember all the supply issues they had, right? Getting food. The one restaurant that didn't, guess who it was? Founding farmers, because they had relationships with local farmers. So we have a plan on how we can connect our local restaurants to our ag reserve, right? So that's going to help support the economy, and it's also good for the environment.
So we're coming to the end of our forum, and many of you in your remarks have touched on strategies for climate change. And I'd love to give you, as part of your closing comments, a chance to address what you see as the county's next steps in addressing climate change. But this is really your free time, so you can use your final 90 seconds any way you wish. And I'm going to start with Mr. Elridge.
So thank you all for coming out here tonight and listening, and for everybody at home who's paying attention. We have an uphill battle to deal with climate change, partly because we're not an island. And so everything we do, if it's not matched by what other people do, is going to make achieving real progress in climate change difficult. And that's the first thing we've got to start with. But the other side of all this is that Montgomery County has been the model before. And to the extent we can successfully do things, we help give confidence to people who are afraid of doing it, don't believe it can be done. And I believe this work can be done. We just need to, be the model, and I think other people will follow. I think other people worry like we do. I don't think everybody has the confidence that they can do this. One of the things we're looking at, we talk a lot about what somebody should do up here. No one talks about the money and where it's going to come from, and that's been a real drag. I've been county executive 2 years where the council said you can only do a same services budget, no new initiatives. That kind of cramps the style. And my first year I started with a $90 million deficit, which is no one's fault. That was the last budget from the previous county executive. So we started with that. But there are some things that have come along that have altered this. The main thing is that with the school buses, and now we're able to apply it to other things, we're able to sell or monetize the asset and give the tax credits to people who can use the tax credits. If I buy a solar bus or electric bus and build the solar field, I get no tax credits for it. There are private sector folks who could buy the equipment and lease it to us, take the tax credits, take the depreciation, and lower the price to the county. We're actually seeing this in real time. That's why the school system is able to make the transition in buses, and we think we can use this in other places. So 3 years ago, when everything looked like a capital project, this was a huge lift. Things look like we can do these with other forms of financing, and we're going to apply that to everything we possibly can. I don't need to own it. I just need to have it. And that's where I think this county is going to go. I see a lot of possibility, and I think we'll be successful.
Mr. James.
Yes. In order to make any of these decisions, we need a county executive that understands physics, that an elephant can't jump, but a flea jumps 100 times its body length. So when you're considering between a heavy bus, which tends to cause 95% of the road damage, trucks and versus a little pod car, the energy efficiency is off the map. So understanding how physics works to apply for these kind of decisions. As far as we're focused on reducing the emissions to zero, which is BS in my mind, but what we need to do, really, we've had 100 years of carbon coming out of the ground. We need to put it back in if we're ever going to make a difference in climate change. This is something called basalt. There's a big pile of a few million tons of it right over the border in Pennsylvania. It's a waste stream. We're going to be building our electric vehicles from it. I want to bring in, rather than saying, oh, we're going to send a good example to the world, I want to build an electric battery and renewable energy industry here in the county, and then we don't have to hope that the rest of the world follows. We can go and bring economic prosperity to the county by making change and bringing out to the world things like eliminating the accelerator. But try some basalt dust in your garden and see how well it helps your crops. Thank you.
Mr. Hucker.
Thank you, Kathleen. I loved much of what Mr. Elrich just said about the need to get these things done and the need to bring people together to do it. And that's one reason that I worked so hard to get him elected 4 years ago. The trouble is, that was the speech from 4 years ago, and very little of this has happened. I began my first year on the council as the chair of the last, during this term, as the chair of the committee, when he defunded the Climate Action Plan, took all the money out of it, and I had to work with my colleagues to restore the Climate Action Plan. Then it was politicized. And we got this high school level report back that didn't give us the quantitative analysis that we had paid for. We need a county executive that's going to approach our climate emergency and our watershed emergency with urgency, and somebody that has a track record of bringing people together and listening and collaborating and not just pointing fingers and making excuses, to actually get things done. And I have the longest track record of doing that at the state level and the county level. These issues are not very local. They are regional and statewide issues. Montgomery County does need to be a leader again. It stopped being a leader a while ago. Prince George's is leading us on climate. Anne Arundel is beating us, and Frederick on forest conservation. There's no reason we shouldn't be passing the best laws in the region, but we're not. And we need a county executive that's committed to the environment and has the skills and the ability to bring people together and get things done. And that's why we need to make a change. Thank you so much for bringing us all together to talk about these important issues, and I look forward to working with you to actually make progress in the next 4 years.
Mr. Riemer.
Well, good evening, and thanks for being with us tonight. Like you, I am very anxious about what I see happening in the news that I read, and I know we're on a terrible path. At the same time, I now, for the first time in my life, feel very optimistic about our ability to deal with it, because I know that there is actually a way to get climate under control. It's called electrification. It will work. What we have to do is stop burning everything. Anything that we burn for Fuel for power, we got to stop burning it. No coal, no gas. Everything has to be solar and it has to be wind. And then everything that we do has to be plugged in to solar and wind on the grid. So every time you flip on the lights, every time you plug in your car, every time you charge your phone, you're pulling from solar and wind and renewable sources of clean energy. We need new leadership in order to make this happen. What we can do at the local level is building energy efficiency, green, energy efficient building codes. I'm working on those proposals now. I've been fighting hard for them. Solar generation. We need solar everywhere. We don't just need it on our rooftops. We don't just need it on our parking lots. We need it on the ground where it can be built at scale at an affordable price. It's time for new leadership to actually make the progress that we need. And I ask for your support. I'm also running as a public finance candidate. I'm not taking any money from real estate companies, from PACs. I'm running as a grassroots-funded, community-based campaign, and I need your support in order to get it done. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Blair.
Thank you. So listening to the five of us this evening, there's a lot of common interest, right? We talked about the need for solar, tree canopy, transportation solutions. Like, there's a lot that we agree upon. I'd suggest what we're missing, executive leadership. I talked a little bit about that. Like, how do you set an ambitious goal and surround yourself with talented people to get that done and remove obstacles? We certainly don't lack for talent in this community. We have the people, we have the know-how to do it. And the county executives called out correctly, all of these things cost money. When I was early in my business career, I was working with the Catholic hospital system. When you'd walk into their corporate offices, on the wall it would say, no margin, no mission. Meaning if we didn't watch the bottom line, we couldn't pursue our mission. And I believe in Montgomery County, our mission is to pursue the things that we talked about, reaching our goal of zero greenhouse emissions. And so what I've done is I've really looked hard at it. So when we have a $6 billion budget, I've gone through it 6 ways to Sunday, right? And that's about the same size as my company's budget. And every year you're finding redundancies, you're leveraging technology to make that budget go farther. That's what I'll do. And I found hundreds of millions of dollars savings in that budget for these initiatives. And the second thing that's killing us, and I talked about our jobs. If you look up over the last 10 years, we've lost $5 billion of net tax migration has left the county. So I'll find the money in the budget, I'll get our economy going to pay for these priorities. Again, thank you for your time this evening. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
And thank you to our audience at home who's been watching this on Zoom. All of you here in the audience here at the Silver Spring Civic Center, you've been so attentive. It's been great to see you in person, paying so much attention to these candidates. I also want to thank the environmental groups who worked very hard together. I was on a number of Zoom calls with them, and they were so collaborative. And so let's give them a round of applause for pulling this all together. The groups that you see there on the screen. And also our candidates. You know, we do have an abundance of talent here in Montgomery County, and so a round of applause for the candidates, David Blair, Mark Elrich, Tom Hucker, Peter James, and Hans Riemer. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Thank you. Yeah, I don't know if it's raining yet out there.
Thank you.